and welcome to Glasgow in 2024 Presents. My name is Esther McCallum-Stewart and I'm the chair of the Glasgow in 2024 Worldcon bid, and I'm really excited to be introducing you to our online events. I hope you enjoy this event, and if you do, why not take a moment to see what else we have coming up online at glasgow2024.org. All of our events are broadcast live, but if you want to watch or listen again, you can find them all online at our YouTube channel. Please feel free to join in the conversation on social media. We'll be using the hashtag #GIN2024 across Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. And you can also find us there at Glasgow in 2024. If you would like to become a supporter of the bid, you can do so at glasgow2024.org/pre-support. Or if you want to volunteer to get involved, then please check out our volunteer page on our website. We can't currently be together, but we do hope we can bring a little bit of the Glasgow 2024 spirit and joy to you wherever you are in the world. Enjoy the event and thank you.
Welcome everybody, and Cameron and Stephen are just going to join us in a wee minute. I hope wherever you are currently in the world that you're doing all right in this heat. We're just checking a couple of technical things, checking that it's gone live on Facebook even, and that everything else is going okay. So let me just make sure everything is fine and wait for my panelists to pop back up. There's Stephen, there's Cameron, brilliant, that's wonderful. And great, hi.
Hello.
So we've already been talking about melting. So if we all slope off into a puddle, that'll be kind of what's happening. So welcome to this event for Glasgow in 2024, which is Bastards, Battles and Banter, oh my. A lot like lions and tigers and bears, because you're never quite sure which one's the one that's actually going to get you. And I definitely feel in reading these books, was it the fact that the battle came out of nowhere in some cases, or was it the fact that some of the jokes were all bad? So that banter part there was in there. Or was it?
Was that good bad or bad bad?
It was good bad. It was that kind of grown bad.
Just checking.
Good.
Just checking.
Good.
Yeah,
I'm having some
it
technical
was
issues.
that, like,
Disconnect.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, but you did. That kind of, shake your head, take a drink. No. And, I think the other part in it was the bastards are pretty bastardy, but they're not as bad as the ones that are supposed to be good. So, this is my real joy of this. So I'm Meg MacDonald. I am one of the DHs for promotions, along with Matt Calvert, who is running the tech today in the background, the man behind the screen. And today we have Stephen Aryan. I asked as well, and I'm just totally struggling. It's the heat, and Cameron Johnston. And so I'm just going to ask each of them to give themselves a wee brief introduction to y'all. Stephen, do you want to shoot first and say who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Stephen Aryan. I write epic fantasy. I've had 2 trilogies out with Orbit Books, and my new duology from Angry Robot starts with The Coward, which is behind me, which came out on June 8th. It's been out sort of a month and a bit now, and the sequel, The Warrior, is coming out June next year, and it's already been written, so don't you worry, it's done, and it goes into edits. There you go.
And you'll survive the editing process as well.
Yeah.
So.
I should do. Yeah.
And Cameron?
Hi, I'm Cameron Johnston. I also write fantasy. I'm sure the covers tell you that anyway. I wrote the Age of Tyranny duology, which is behind me up here, and my new one, Maleficent 7, is just coming out on August 10th.
Yep, and they're both absolutely cracking books, as is their previous works. And there's themes that keep going through, which I love, but there's also sort of big changes as well, which again is great to see developing. So what we're just kind of going to do is say to everybody in the chat, we have a giveaway. Angry Robot have very kindly given us a copy of each of the books, and we're going to give one lucky person both, because you should be able to compare and contrast like I have been doing. So if you fancy a chance to win, just write in the chat, me, I want to win, kind of deal. And what we'll do is we'll keep a record of that, and we'll check at the end, and we'll post that in all our socials who is one. We'll just do a name draw for it. So and then we will post them to you, and you will get to enjoy them. And actually you might even get to enjoy the Maleficent 7 before it comes out, which is it's always fun. It's always fun. So Stephen's going to do as a wee reading to kick us off, as I melt in the background. So Stephen, take it away.
Okay, right. I'm going to read just a short piece from chapter 1. If you read the back of the book, or even if you haven't, I can kind of tell you what it's about. A guy 10 years ago did something absolutely amazing, and he's a hero across the 5 kingdoms. And the book is all about the differences between reality of being a hero and perception, and our heroes, the great people that people think they are, versus what we have in the media, or in this case, the Bard's Tale. You know, so there's reality versus fiction. So I'll just read you a bit from chapter 1. So close to the mic, here we go. Are you Kel Cressia? I am. She wore a black tricorn hat marked with 5 blue ribbons. That meant she was allowed to trade across all 5 kingdoms, including the Holy City. Is that your sword, Slayer? She asked, gesturing towards the silver blade above the fireplace. Its surface seemed to shimmer in the firelight. Everyone else pretended not to notice the excited merchant. This wasn't the first time someone from out of town had reacted like this. Yes, that's it, said Kel. It's a pleasure, a real pleasure, said the woman, her eyes wide with delight. My name is Roaz Tan Nadia. Kel forced a smile, even though he was starting to feel anxious. People were beginning to stare. He could feel their eyes on him like ants crawling across his skin. He needed to sit down and leave him alone. Can I join you for a drink? Asked Nazia. I'll pay, of course, she volunteered. Kel shook his head, despite the offer of a free drink. It was always the same. They asked the same questions without fail. What did the Eichlich look like? Did he really cut off a head with one blow? What happened to the heroes? Are their bodies really still up there on the ice? To them, it was nothing more than an exciting story, but he had lived through the events in the Bard's saga. Digging up the past always left him feeling uneasy and bitter. They had been rich and famous warriors that people still adored despite being dead for 10 years. As the only survivor, he'd come home to a fanfare, but little else for his efforts. There'd been no reward, no riches, not even a reprieve from his taxes. I don't think that's a good idea, said Kel, not wanting to indulge Nadia's curiosity. More heads were turning in his direction, and now 3 merchants were standing beside his table. The other 2 were a local apprentice and another Corvanese with only 2 ribbons. Please, we just want the real story. We've heard it from the bards, but they always embellish it. More people were taking note of the conversation. Without being asked, Nadia sat down, and before Kel could protest, her 2 friends followed suit. One placed a mug of beer in front of him. We just want the truth, said the apprentice. People went back to their own business, and Kel felt some of the nervous energy drain away. Kel shook his head. You don't want that. Nobody wanted the truth about what had happened. They all said it, but the truth was ugly. It was a knotted web of grey decisions, not black and white. People wanted neat and simple, but life was a convoluted path of decisions that no one could predict. If he told Nadia that he'd been kicked out of the army at 17 because he was tired of following orders, she'd tell him it was fate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been at home to hear about the call to arms. When the weather changed, the dwellers from beyond the frozen circle, the Frostrunner clans, sent an emissary south to meet with the 5 kings. There hadn't been such a conclave in hundreds of years. Normally, the clans had no reason to leave their homeland on the ice, but even they were struggling to survive. 10 years ago, the Frostrunners had been starving to death, along with everyone else. The 5 kings came to an agreement and called upon their best, the bravest and greatest warriors. Lobran One-Eye, Cadeus the Bold, Droshala the Beautiful, Bronn the Mighty, and others. A total of 11 heroes that everyone knew and loved. Kel, like every other teenager, had idolized them. How quickly that had changed. They might have been warriors with famous names, but they weren't heroes. After days in the saddle, they'd moaned about sore arses like everyone else. No one wanted to hear about that, or how their mighty leader, Cadeus, had a bad belly and got a run of the shits for 3 days. Tell us about the heroes, said the apprentice, startling Kell from his reverie. No, tell us about the ice lich. Did she really turn the weather sour? Was it worse than now, said the other merchant. I don't want to talk about it, said Kell, sliding the untouched beer across the table. He didn't want to go back there in his mind. Kell was about to get up from the table when Nadia's question caught him by surprise. When were you most afraid? Anger flooded Kell's mind, and he sank back into his chair. According to the Medina saga, his worst moment had come when he battled the ice lich. The truth was far more shocking, and that part of the story hadn't made it into the bard's tale. Fine, I'll tell you the real story, said Kell. It was the day Bronn the Mighty collapsed. There you go.
Thank you very much. I think, you know, listening to that part there, as well as the kind of setup of, there's always something, so the first casualty in war is truth. And kind of that part where, you know, it's present in both books, but you mythologize the hero, you mythologize what it is that got the victory. And you don't spend a lot of time thinking about the fact that, you know, feet will have rotted off and you know, they will have had to eat their dogs or something, you know, something along those lines. You're not going to, it's that under the surface, and drawing attention to it seemed gauche to point out, you know, that the trauma of survival, as well as kind of survivor's guilt. And I think it really struck me with The Coward that that's something you do right from the start. I mean, the name from the very outset is there, but the kind of the looking at the trauma of survival. Can you sort of talk about that a wee bit, why that was the real sort of focus that seemed to come through?
I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of reading. It's one of these things where lots of different things filter into your brain and you're never completely sure how they're going to come out. I'd been reading a lot about soldiers coming back from war with PTSD and how it changed them. Reporters coming back from war and the same thing. I'd read a couple of biographies of different soldiers and that sort of thing. And it's just and then you only see a certain thing on the news. And then there's the reality of what happened for the people on the ground. And I wanted to kind of explore that and the idea of, we've all in this book, they've all heard the great story of what happened to him. He went north with the heroes and they slayed it and it was great and it was brilliant. And he came back and yay, everyone's victorious, except everybody else died apart from him. That's the kind of bit that people kind of skate over. They want to hear about the heroes, but there's the fact that he was 17 and he tagged along. He wasn't really welcome, but he went anyway. And he watched the 11 greatest heroes in the 5 kingdoms who were summoned by the kings die in front of him one at a time in horrible ways. And he comes back home and it's, hey, well done. And then nothing. And he's been broken by it and changed by it. And he just wants a quiet life. And essentially he has PTSD. So it was exploring that. And you don't need to turn on the telly, and anytime there's a celebrity or something on the news, there's the reality of what the media shows, and then there's the truth of, if you dig into the headlines, what's actually going on, or what's that person really like, you know. I don't want to go into the football thing, but you know, there's that versus, okay, but that person also works for lots of charities. He's fed hundreds of thousands of children. He put pressure on the government. He's had 80,000 books into schools for children, you know, and it's just like, oh yeah, but he missed a penalty. Well, there's the deception and there's a reality of the man, and it's this kind of thing. And in this case, it was to do with, you know, heroic heroes who slay monsters. But you know, they all burp and fart and have problems of their own.
I think that was part of it. I thought it was also this kind of that real sort of thing that you set that up, and you know, from the back, no, we're going to try and avoid spoilers, guys, but I am warn you all in the audience, not great at it. You should read the books anyway. But that he's called again to take up.
Yeah, that's on the back of the book.
Yeah, he's called again to take up a chalice. This time he really doesn't want to. You know, he goes along full-hearted as a kid, and you know, 10 years have passed. He's 27. He's not a haggard old guy or anything like that. He should be having, you know, a particular life that he's not having. And his steps are dogged by his own fears, and then by the perceptions that other people have of his bravery or his cowardice. And I think that constant struggle, it's quite an interesting one, because there's all the way through, there's the deals that we make with the comrades as we go along the way. And kind of what I was struck by in both the books, and so I want to move on into Cameron's reading so we can come in and tie them together, is they've both got these very strange fellowships that are formed.
Yes,
Now,
I read his, I know.
Very true.
Yes. Very, very strange. And, you know, one of the most famous fellowships of all, right? So the Fellowship of the Ring, and like only one really dies in that one. You know, Boromir carks it, and that's the noble sort of moment.
Spoilers.
I know. I said only one. I got away for a very long time by saying it. Gandalf the Grey never comes back. But but in both of these texts, there's much more tension, because actually not that many people will survive of the fellowship that you form in these structures, and that knowledge of sacrifice is a bit more well, it's very earthy at points, but it's a bit more sort of why you make the choices anyway if you know you're not going to survive, and why you might make them if perhaps you have been hung out to dry, or you can't trust the people you're with. What are the things that you're calling to? So on that note, we will segue to Cameron, and we'll settle in to hear some of the wonderful Maleficent 7.
Okay, this is part of chapter 3. So a little bit of background. The dread demonologist Black Haran was once on the verge of conquering the entire continent when she mysteriously disappeared. 40 years later, there's the place she's living at now is under threat from an army of religious fanatics, and she's gathering her old captains back. And to do this, she's sent off Maven the Necromancer, and the first person she's recruiting is the Vampire Lord. So I'll read from that. Hurry, little man! Stab me with your spear! Summon more of your god-touched magic and strike me down! Fight me! Fight! You monster! The sole surviving Lucent soldier cried, stumbling back, spear slipping from his grip to clatter to the blood-slick flagstones of the ruined tower. Bright One, protect me! Nearly blind in the moonless night, the soldier tripped and fell, laying wide-eyed and shaking amidst a dozen corpses of his unit, all shredded mail, flayed flesh and shattered bone. Even their holy acolytes' prayers of protection had proved useless before the monster they faced, and that man's shaved head now adorned a broken spear thrust into the earth. A pool of piss began spreading beneath the soldier. The monster, Lorimer, fell, sighed and sagged, his unnatural flesh slipping out of war form and back into human guise. Claws retreated into fingers and toes, spiked tail retreated into a human spine, and his leathery hide smoothed back into soft, dark skin. As always, he felt lesser, but the ever-present hunger also retreated to a dull roar, heightened only by the gaping wounds that marred his body. No matter, he would heal those as soon as they could be bothered to. The Vampire Lord's once fine scarlet tunic and fox fur cloak hung in tatters around his broad black shoulders, the price paid for the change. The last of his finery was gone now, the Lucent Empire and the damnable Inquisitors occupied his home within Aid's reach. Mighty and enduring as he was, even he could not stand against such a host of men and magic, not if he wanted to keep his remaining people alive. Pitiful mortal, he said. His voice was deep as humans reckoned, but after being in war form, it sounded weak and reedy. Where are your god-touched knights with a golden fire? You think such pitiful grip can kill me with mere steel and petty magics? Fools. He picked up a fallen sword and separated the soldier's head from his body with a casual backswing. He stepped over the corpse fountaining blood and retreated to his makeshift camp in the shade of the crumbling south wall, to where his faithful old servant was pinned to the wall by a spear through the belly. Only a month ago, Lorimer had been at home in Freyd's Reach, draped in fine furs and facing Estevan across the checkboard in the castle's library. a glass of ruinously expensive imported wine in hand as they advanced their playing pieces. It had been no surprise Esteban was winning again, but the vampire lord had learned a few new tricks from his books and was offering up a good challenge. The fire had been roaring, the wine flowing, and it had been a most pleasant evening until the guards rang the warning bell. Rushing to the window, they watched as over 1,000 burning torches snaked up the hill. The lucent army had invaded Fade's Reach. Their holy knights in fire drove Lorimer from his ancestral home. The last he'd seen of it, they'd been ripping his hunting trophies off the walls to build a bonfire of his belongings outside his own front door. It had taken all of Estevan's calm logic to dissuade Lorimer from making a futile last stand. Instead, he had ordered all his people to flee, to hide and survive in the treacherous mountains of Mora and Spain, where the lucent soldiers would never find them. But Estevan, brave and loyal Estevan, had refused to leave with them and demanded to accompany his lord into exile. Come what may, he was determined to stand at his lord's side as they drew the enemy away from their people. The army followed in relentless pursuit of the vampire lord. Take your grace back, my lord fell, Estevan said, shivering in the freezing weather. His manservant's gaunt, blood-splattered face twisted in agony, each breath a short gasp of pain. His brown skin now held shades of deathly grey. I shan't have much need for it myself. He hissed as his legs threatened to buckle, body held upright only by the spear pinning him to the wall. Even his master's grace flowing through his veins could not heal such a wound, and the pool of blood beneath him was spreading with alarming speed. Very true, Lorimer said sadly. You served me well, my old friend. The vampire's bloody wounds needled his ravening hunger, got it distend in his teeth to grow into fangs that would rip and tear and swiftly devour. He would make it quick, a small mercy for a century of loyal service. A familiar, loathsome voice pierced through the hunger. Hold, he can yet be healed. It took an act of enormous willpower to stop himself from tearing into the soft, succulent flesh of Estevan's neck. But his hate was stronger than his hunger. He spun to face the voice, hissing. Maven. The last person he had ever expected to see. The necromancer carefully stepped between the mangled corpses and sketched a brief bow. In one hand, she clutched an obsidian knife with a silver hilt, and in the other a small glass vial, brandished like a weapon. Well met, Lorimer Fell, Lord of Fade's Reach. She straightened, met and held his gaze. Or you were, once. He sensed the tingle of magic at work within both knife and vial and knew she had come prepared with deadly necrotic weapons. His body spasmed, jutting bones, spines, and razor claws. Pray tell, why should I not feast on your withered heart? For the very best of reasons, she replied. Black Haran is alive, and she offers revenge on the same lucent scum who have seized your home. And that's that.
Thank you. And I thought that was a like sort of the bait and switch part of how do you draw somebody back in. So, again, no spoilers from the back of the book. Black Haran has abandoned all of her generals on the eve of victory, and they messed it up because they couldn't fight without her.
They're all very, very bad, very self-involved people. So it's no wonder.
they did not play nice together, and they were led by fear and everything else like that. But in a path of self-interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
At that point, and she's reappeared, and obviously they're going to be intrigued, pissed.
Oh yes.
And I mean, I can imagine sort of thinking about that in the recruitment of like, I'm coming along just to kill her myself, I'm not just no, I'm not coming. I mean, like, I'm coming because I'm going to come for her, kind of deal.
Because I mean, after just this, you're on the verge of conquering. You're going to want to know why, before you kill her.
Yeah, like what was it exactly?
Yeah.
That made you sort of change your mind. And I think it's an interesting thing in both books, because it's the call to arms sort of moment. Why why people are coming back to a cause, what what has invested them in it, and in in the Maleficent, it's just straightforward revenge. It's straight,
revenge and self-interest. Absolutely.
And it's the pacts, it's the devil they know that they decide to kind of deal with. And I find that very interesting, because there has become in the Lucian Empire a beggar bastard.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
There has become someone that they can effectively put over their extreme scheming hate of each other.
It's the old thing of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's not really your friend.
That's a point. But yeah, I think that was something that I really appreciated, was that kind of slow collection in both cases of the people that are going to be there at whatever end it would be, and the coward doesn't want anybody with him. he's got plans to exit stage left as soon as he possibly can, and he's tricked and manipulated into it, and then kind of builds that up, and
what I like about both books is that they're all older characters, which I grew up reading all the big doorstopper fantasies with the the naive farm boy and the older mentor that basically just hands everything over on the plate, which of course doesn't happen with these books. And well, it kind of did in the back history of Stevens, but well, you see the result of that.
Yeah, everything didn't go great when he came back. He didn't get the magic sword and live happily. He's rich in a castle with lots of women. He's miserable on his own and poor. So
absolutely,
great reward.
Older characters, it just gives you a lot more opportunity to have back histories, and I
think as well it gives them not only the back histories of their own life and all their own experiences, loves, traumas, things that they would do but their own the interactions, particularly kind of with each other, and how that they know it's not simple. They know it's not straightforward. Bronwyn joins in the coward because she will be the best at the things. She's bored of a challenge, without a challenge to some extent. And Amog is very similar. She's called back because but it's the well, I will be the best warrior because you puny humans are going to learn.
They're very similar characters in that respect. When you've defined yourself by challenging yourself and overcoming adversity, and then you've got not much else to do, if you can find that new challenge, you're going to go for it.
Yeah, very much so. And both rather fabulous women characters as well, like very very to the point about their points.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to kind of enjoy as well, because again, it's the older character, it's that a little bit more rounded sort of.
Yeah, they know what they want.
They know what they want, and they also can see it in other people as well. So they're like, you're a liar. You're making that up. I've been around here before. I'm not about to fall for charm. Or, why would you call me this when clearly I am a powerful orc chieftain? Here, take the backhanded slap.
Yes.
And I think that was really enjoyable. And I would say as well, in the coward, you have, both books have religious fanaticism, and it's fair to say one is, Maleficent 7 is right out there. It's peaked already. It's like full fanatic, burn them with the power part. And the coward, it's the political scheming in advance of that sort of, you've had 40 years pass in the Maleficent Seven, you're 10, so you're in the early stages of that kind of scheming, and the early kind of stages of how somebody manipulates religion or the concepts of godhood or worship or belief to further political man-made or women-made, in the case of the Reverend Mother, ideological perspectives. And I thought she was a very interesting character. Stephen, could you talk about her a wee bit? Because
in Cam's book, it's not a spoiler to say that the presence of some very powerful deity is quite clear, because certain people have abilities that are God-given and they become, stronger, faster, more powerful, whereas she's very much of the mind that there's no such thing as a supernatural. She's quite an old woman. That's the other thing. She's starting to lose her mind. Her body is breaking down, and she knows that time is limited. But she's lived quite a long time, so she's seen the seasons change. She's seen the world go through cold spells and then hot spells and then cold spells. So she thinks that it's just like a natural part of the global warming and cooling phase. So when someone says, "Oh, we had a bad winter," and this, she's like, "Yeah, that happened. Things got better 10 years ago, and now it's happening again." "Oh yes, well, it's the supernatural." And she's like, "Well, why do you jump to the easiest, something weird?" And where she's got the experience if you think of it from her point of view, she's kind of a mind of, you're reaching something that's really easy rather than actually trying to do something about it. So if someone says, "Oh, well, we're all starving," and she's like, "Okay, well, if you all work together and help each other with the food, and communities work together, you can all feed each other through this difficult time." Whereas they want the easy solution, which is kill the evil in the north. That'll solve it. And she's very much of, well, shouldn't we just work together and help each other and be nice to our neighbors and do it that way, as opposed to kill the spirit in the sky and that'll sort it. And so from her point of view, she's got this, for the last 10 years, she's been trying to get past this ridiculous thing that this bloke did that apparently saved the world. And now he's turned up again and he wants to do it again because the weather's changed. And she spent 10 years trying to get rid of this stupid story that's being sung in all of the taverns. And now he's going to do it again and undermine the last 10 years' work. Of she's trying to have lots of orphanages to feed children and raise them the right way and give them education and teach them how to be loyal and faithful.
The right way. Yeah, I mean, I feel that her beatific kindness might need. I mean, she gave a spy mistress some serious running for money there.
Well, it's the other thing of, there's the actual teachings and then there's how the person interprets it. So the 12 pillars in the good book are actually all perfectly reasonable ones, like show compassion, be kind, do this, don't do that. But it's how the structure and the society and the church then distributes that and gets people to believe. No, believe. I believe now.
That's the thing. When you get any large power structure, you're going to have people that want that power, and the people that tend to rise up that rank are the people good at playing the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, never trust the vizier. But I do think that I find that a very interesting sort of set piece, because as you say, you're talking about she's looking at the politics of power and how you move the pieces on the board to manipulate, and for her, belief is not a power force in the same way. It's something different. There's the kind of a faith thing. We don't have that kind of belief as a charging aspect. Whereas in Cam's book, that belief, that fear aspect is what charges up the gods, the gods themselves. And I think it's a very it's an interesting, different way to see how a person running a thing, running the church, say, in The Coward, versus the Falcon Prince and what he's doing with belief in the Lucian Empire to create power. She is manipulating politics with the words, whereas he's creating manifestations of that belief, so people then kind of double down on it. And I find it very interesting to see it
Well, the
You know.
thing about the Falcon Prince's rise to power in the Lucent Empire is that it comes in the wake of Black Haran's attempted conquest of the continent. So she had an army of monsters and men, bandits and rebels. They were bringing down noble families, destroying countries, and then she disappeared, and all those groups scattered. Bandits all across the country and whatnot. The place is still in fear. Then up pops the Falcon Prince as a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And he's offering a solution to all of this dark magic and all these monsters, and the terrified populace laps
up. The
up.
world.
Yeah.
That's heroic.
Absolutely.
And that was the part that really struck me about, you know, so just a reading order for me was I read The Coward first, and obviously was like hero, coward, and then looking all the way through it, that those different sort of what is a coward, what is a hero, and they come to this part, and the one that is immediately the white and shining light with, you know, silver armor, and you're like, bad guy, very, very bad guy.
Well, from
and all of the people in his
Oh, I'm pretty sure the purifying choices of the I mean, that's the first. Here's the thing. Now everybody expects the Spanish Inquisition. So the minute you hear the word Inquisitor,
there's no comfy chair. No cushion.
The cushion. Bring forth the cushion and the comfy chair.
And I think that's like, I think that was something I really enjoyed, because I wanted to ask about you both subverting things. You know, Stephen, you've got someone who wanted to be a hero, did something heroic ultimately out of sheer survival, now doesn't feel like a hero and isn't really treated like a hero, but still is a hero, and, you know, has that mantle, but internally wears the I'm a coward, but is he really? And then Cameron, you've got 7 really just utter bastards.
Yeah.
And I mean,
it was enormous fun to write.
I mean, they're great. I mean, I do. How do you say? Is it Tierna? Have you got it? Yeah, Tierna. So your war god, who, for any of you, if you're about to read it, or when you read it, just in the voice of pure Glaswegian, there's like a Knack McFeagle-esque aspect in there as well. But I was just, you know, I had that sort of, I hear this on the streets, the streets voice just before it all kicks off. And it was that same sort of thing.
Yeah, he just popped straight into my head, complete with accent, and you know.
I was like, I read it, and the first thing, the note with the first, I was like, why did you make the brawling war god Scottish? It's Glasgow in 2024. We were looking for a wee bit, but actually, he's such a cracking character. He might be him, and I'm might be 2 of my favorites out of all of them. I think,
but again, they have a little camaraderie going on there.
They do. They have a camaraderie. They have a real a competitive one as well. You know, a kind of a thing. And, you know, keep each other in their place. But I think it's also the way that they relate to the townsfolk, to the peasants, to you know, that kind of, everybody else is going to be using them or not because that's their role in survival. You know, it's a necromancer. She needs dead people.
Yeah,
you know,
this is the thing about writing 7 villains. It allows you an opportunity to do different ones. You can have some that are just complete monsters, and then you've got other ones that just come from different cultures, or you know, evil's a matter of perspective. If you're on the other side, they're evil, but from their side, you know, they're just normal, if not good.
Seems perfectly reasonable.
Absolutely.
To defend their land. But that was what I was going to ask about. You sort of subvert things, and was that more fun? Was that more challenging to kind of to get a hold of, or did it fall into play?
Well, I had enormous fun, absolutely enormous fun. Writing 7 very different characters that are all villains in different ways. Yeah, I just had the best of times writing it.
And Stephen, what about you, kind of flipping those parts at points?
It was good to kind of start after the great thing had happened and see what happens next. So, you know, as you said, Cam, you have these adventures where the boy goes on the adventure and he comes home and everything's great. And it's like, well, what happens next? You know, you've got the slightly older character. What happens if something else comes up? It's not the end of the story. So what happens next?
Yeah, I mean, if they don't become the king, what do you do?
If all the heroes are dead, who rises up? And in your case, it's awful villains. Well, I say villains, but, you know, I like them. And in my case, who turns up? It's a minor spoiler, but there's this awful kind of scene where they go into a tavern and try and audition some new people to join them. And it's horrific. It's like something out of X Factor crossed with.
Oh, it's so
like
bad. I mean, that
scene.
was what crossed my mind.
See, I was thinking Mystery Men.
Yeah, that too. That's kind of what do you do? And they're like, we'll call you, you know. It's just some awful moments like that, because if all the heroes are dead and you need new recruits, who steps forward? And it's not good.
And who steps forward if you tell them the truth? You know,
Yes.
it made me think of the Wilfred Owen poem. So that with young men with that ardent glory, and I'm going to butcher it because it's been a long time since I've read that lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. So there is no greater glory than to die for your country. And, you know, it's that look in a war of him seeing people coming back with mustard gas and the ruined lungs and, you know, broken bodies, broken minds, and yet we churn out young, ardent soldiers with that lie that there's no greater glory than to die for your country. And Kel's an interesting one because he didn't like taking orders, so he's jacked off the army. He's obviously thought there must be a greater glory than to die in an organized formation for my country and come back. Because that scene in, you know, the scene in the tavern and kind of at later points is interesting between him needing people to join. And if he tells them the truth, that they just won't.
Want to. Yeah. And there's a scene quite early on where there's the kind of flip side of that, where the king's talking and sort of says, you know, get him to go around and tell his story. And loads of people have signed up. They'll hear it from the horse's mouth. They're not hearing it from the bards. And it'd be great.
The lying bards.
You know, they get front row seat from the person who was there telling the story and inspire them. And then you get loads of people signing up and the army will grow. So there we go, you know, the great glory. And people think, oh, brilliant. And it's like, well, that's what he tells you. But
it also made me think a little bit of, you know, the Hunger Games, where the tributes have to go around afterwards. So they've all been called together and, you know, they go off and fight, etc., so on and so forth. It's a kind of a Hungry Game sort of thing. But when they go around afterwards into each of the districts and that cows the districts and they kind of recognize and worship. And that part of actually, when you see the cost of war, sometimes you want to fight the people who are making you go and fight it versus, you know, someone else out there. And I do think that, I think that sort of thing with the coward was the sort of, the heroes are just people like everybody else, you know. They shit, they beat their partner, they cry over their dogs, they, you know, they have all these feelings, and it's what will eventually make them stand and deliver, you know, stand and fight or not. And the thing in Cameron, I'm going to not give spoilers, but there is a part on page 202 and a part on page 229 where at one point we're told from Lorimer Fell, the monster's perspective, he'd hunted most of them down and after a great battle devoured them, and he'd enjoyed it. He was a monster in many ways, but he could accept that burden in order to protect his people. And a bit later, we're faced with a northern lord who is in service of the Bright One against his own sort of wishes, and the pain receded but did not depart entirely. It was a compromise that left him feeling that he had disappointed both his goddess and himself, the guilt was almost overwhelming, but he endured it to protect his people. And so there's that kind of immediate, making monstrous choices, but for what reasons? Or, do you accept part of a monster inside you to get a thing done? Because I think that's quite an interesting.
Well, it's especially when you've got a war, you've got to do horrible things to the other side. There are questions about how horrible you want to be.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, you've still got to kill a lot of people. So you can't pretend you're the best person ever. Even in a defensive war, horrible things are going to happen, and all history. Every time a city's been under siege, it's been absolute mayhem once the bloodied up troops get in. They've seen their friends get killed, and they're going to take it out on the populace. And historically, that's pretty much always been the case. And they might consider themselves the good ones,
Oh, that's it, isn't it? It's with God on our side sort of statement in different in different parts of it.
If they're pure and innocent, God will sort it out on the other side. So we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, I think God will sort it out on the other side. We can do whatever we want. I think that's an interesting part. Both books had a really strong theme of redemption for me, kind of personal, like societal to some extent as well. And I wondered, what was it that kind of brought in that writing for you? Kind of, you've talked about trauma in both, and betrayal. So what was it that redemption is playing a part in those choices?
Well, I think you've got to have the flip side. I mean, most people are fundamentally good if given a chance, but on the other hand, you've also got bastards. So you've got the two flip sides of kind of what humans are. And you're going to have the same thing in religion. You're going to have people that are going out and feeding the starving, healing the sick, doing good deeds, and then you're going to have the people that are going to launch genocidal crusades and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. I think that there was the personal redemptions for each of the characters as well. I mean, their choices back. I was thinking Tierna particularly as one sort of moment loses his clan and is a war god without he's a former war god.
Yep, really. Absolutely.
And as he called it a drunken coward to some extent, and everything else like that. And I was thinking about his fears of facing certain things, and actually Kel's fears of going back on the ice, knowing what was there. The others didn't know, and they don't really until they hit the ice, and they're right at that thing, and it's like, right, so tell us, this is the last point to turn back, you tell us this. And I thought that was such a, in both cases, it really gave me a lot of what was courage over cowardness. And it seemed to be those acts of personal redemption.
The other thing is with Kel, he's the only one that came back. So everything he knows and everything everybody else knows comes from him. What if he was wrong? What if he's an unreliable narrator? What if he misremembers things? What if trauma tricked him? So part of it is confirming what he thinks he knows. Did it happen the way he thinks it did? Did they all die in the way he did? Did he actually help in any way? Did he actually kill her or not? And there's this doubt of the fact that if she's come back, how could she have come back 10 years later? He obviously ran, and that's why he thinks himself a coward, but then he can't be sure. So part of it is because it has to be done and he knows what to do, and part of it is he needs to be sure that the things he thinks he knows are true. But you know, if he'd come back and there's someone else that survived, he could go to them and say, "Is this right?" But there's no backup. There's no.
Yeah.
So he's carried this by himself for 10 years. The truth, there's the version everyone else knows, but he's carried the whole truth for 10 years, and that's eaten away at him.
Yeah, and he would not have been in a good state when he came back either.
No, he was you know, non-functioning for months. He couldn't do anything, and it's all based upon sort of real stuff that I'd researched with, you know, soldiers and reporters and this kind of stuff. So yeah, so it's redemption of his own soul, redemption of the truth for him, and proving that he was as good as he thinks he might have been, but even he's not sure.
I was going to say, because he's not, is he? He worries he betrays each of those, not necessarily each of those comrades that he had on that journey to some extent, not just by his own survival, but by maybe not saving them in a particular way, or could he have done more? Could he have, you know, was it his fault? And I think that's like it's an interesting thing, because you've got Garen. You have the next generation of farm boy running off onto the hike. You know, I'm coming with you. I'm following you. I'm going to do this thing. And he's like, no, you're not. Back home, on you go. He's like, no. You got to be the big hero. You just want all the glory for yourself. He's like, no, this is a hard pass here. This is it. And he won't listen. And you've got that arrogance of youth, that sort of, that part of it.
Yeah. I blame the bards personally.
Immortal.
Definitely blame the bards.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's an interesting because you've got the arrogance of youth right there. And then if we take and the peasants in the town, you've got all these people who are like, I don't want to do this. This is terrible. Hard pass. And then the brilliant character of Penny, who is like, you come after my family and I will gut you. Effectively, absolutely wrecking it. Or the kids who are like, fork in hand, we will fight, you know, toddlers, we will fight, because it's pot on head, because it's,
well, they don't understand what's going on for them.
Yeah, and also because there's this sort of thing of, there's a drive to survive, and they don't understand, and they see something heroic in a monster. They see something protecting them to some extent.
Well, you see, the monsters are on their side, so
it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
It's kind of an interesting dynamic there. It's like, oh, we're horrendously scared of these things, but they're on our side, so technically they're good, because we're good. So,
but the monster that was among them the entire time, they can't accept her in the same way. That's their betrayal. You know, that sort of Elder Dahlia, who is Black Heron, is now just that's an interesting set of dynamics there. It almost seems worse, really, than what she did to her captains. You know,
these are all strangers coming in apart from her, and it's difficult to you can't really reconcile that with who she used to be.
No,
as far as they knew.
And it kind of also I guess that is the thing as well. Like, you've housed the monster and didn't know it. You know, so what does that make about your choices, or, you know, who you think is your neighbor, which is an interesting kind of, you know, if you think about sort of Nazi scientists that fled after the war and everything else about it, it's like, who is your neighbor?
Operation Paperclip.
Yeah.
Then of course you start thinking, well, what was she doing in the shadows? Paranoia.
Yeah, she was raising a much scarier daughter by all intents and purposes. You're definitely like, oh, your daughter's got nothing. It's gonna just oof. But no, I think that was one of the things I liked, was that kind of the mirror journey as well for again, and not going into where their journey goes or what happens on the ice. Everybody should go and read it and find out. Because I'm going to be very honest with you both. Like, I was ready for some very blokey fantasy. I was ready for some very straightforward, fart jokes and fighting and everything else like that. And not in a bad way, in any way, shape, or form. And starting the hearing was like, well, this is PTSD and trauma and dementia and power politics and retention. And I was coming to it and I was like, these monsters are not, well, I mean, yes, they're monsters and definitely don't eat anything that guy serves you, but still. And, I would say that I think that it's an interesting sort of thing, because we talk about this we would say about publishing and the power of how a book is marketed, or what's sort of shown or putting on the back cover. And you have that sort of, the book's called The Coward, you have a lone hero, you have this thing, the Maleficent Seven. I spent quite a lot of time looking at the cover going, well, that's that's
Laura Maffel. That one's
that must be Jack. And especially as they revealed
there's
more
a little bit of
themselves.
artistic license there.
Yeah, a wee bit, but there was definitely some that were more like, oh yeah, no, I see you as well. But even a monster can incur loyalty. Bestevan, the faithful servant, who's given the chance to go many times and chooses not. And I do think there's some just really brilliant parts. So here's the next part. They're not lone hero books. They're ensemble pieces. Is that more fun to write? And because Cameron, you had double perspectives in the Traitor God and the Broken God of Broken Things. Yeah, and which I've read both of them. They were very, very good. We need to talk about those at a different point. And in Battle Mage, I haven't read all of them, Stephen, yet. I started it and I was like, damn it, this could be thesis relevant for me. So I'll be following that one up. You have different point of view characters, but they don't necessarily interact with each other all the way through. So whereas with both of these, you've written really strong ensemble pieces. They don't feel necessarily like they would work if one of those pieces was taken away. Was that more fun, more challenging to write than the sole person, or was it?
I've not done single point of view book, first person in a while. I've dabbled with it myself, but I've never written a full book that way. So I'm used to doing third person. This one is a lot tighter because there's mainly only two main points of view. You occasionally get something glimpsed from someone else, but they're all within the same space, so it's only a slightly different perspective on what you've already seen sometimes, or a different conversation between a couple of people. So it was more fun in some ways because I was able to fit all of the pieces together, and sometimes you want the conversation from the other side of the room, and I could do that with this. And I know Cam's done the same in his books. Like, he'll have someone on the wall having one conversation, a bit further down they'll be saying, no, look at them, and so I've done a bit of that. So that was fun. It was a new thing for me to do. I constantly want to challenge myself and my writing, and this was one of the ways to do it, was to force myself to not have 3, 4, 5 main points of view, but keep it very tight, keep it very lean, and just try and grow this group of people together into something sort of a found family type story. Versus, go on.
My first job.
Oh, I don't want you frozen, Cameron. That sounded
it's
really
frozen.
Oh,
you're back.
You're back. Start back again.
Go again.
So the Traitor God and God of Broken Things from one point of view. So there's all sorts of things going on around them. I couldn't write. I couldn't show people. So with this book, I decided, like Stephen said, I'm going to challenge myself. So I to 7 major and a handful of minor ones. So I was like, right, I can show everything this time. So that was a very interesting experience.
Yeah,
I felt like I had to develop a lot of voice for all these different characters, which I really enjoyed.
I was going to say they do have quite strong voices, and Stephen, despite yours all kind of coming mostly from Kel's perspective with the other Flashes, because they're grown together, you get very strong senses of each of the personalities of them, and I did sort of see them as very cinematic. There was that sort of the picture of the cinematic part. So before we ask, pick up on some of the questions that we've got from our audience. Casting choices.
Oh no,
Oh, dearies.
Well, I know Cameron because you gave us a wee bit of a spill earlier, so that
Yes.
you can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
You have a wee thing, at least for Kel.
Okay.
Well, so the vampire, Lormer Fell, in my head, he looks a bit like Idris Elba. There's I thought the necromancer maybe Eva Green.
Ooh.
You know, I'm basically just listing off some of my favorite actors and whatnot.
Yeah, I know.
Let's be
Oh,
honest.
you know.
Yeah.
So the Mad Alchemist. Have you seen Vikings?
Yeah.
Floki.
Ah, interesting.
So I wasn't sure between him and Tom Hiddleston. They could both pull
Interesting.
off that kind of Mad Alchemist.
I had a real John Hurt vibe from him, weirdly. Kind of an older, real sort of, guy, I'll remember his name. Keep going. I'm interested.
So for Black Haran, I was like, I wonder if they could get Helen Mirren. Helen Mirren in pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I'm never sure about the orcs because obviously there'd be like a lot of makeup and a lot of CGI going. So I'm like, right, okay, so who's female, who's tall, who can act? Well, Gwendolyn Christie.
Totally Gwendolyn Christie.
She could kick ass, yeah.
She would be amazing.
And the Pirate Queen, I'm really conflicted on that one because it could be like any of 6 different actresses and that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay. So there's the have you seen The Expanse?
Yes.
The woman that's in charge of the Earth, the UN.
Shori Agdashlu.
Yes, that's it. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but that's it. Exactly.
Shori.
So she was amazing.
Brilliant.
And
I love that character so much.
And
Christian
I thought maybe
Avasarala is...
Yeah. And I thought maybe Julianne Moore as well. That could work. So that's kind of what I've got in my head for those.
What about for Chernoff?
Well, Tony Curran.
Oh, interesting.
So if you've seen the episode of Doctor Who with Van Gogh,
yeah,
you've got the ginger, most Scottish.
Yep.
No.
Most Scottish Van Gogh that's going.
He was very good in 13th Warrior. Was one of the warriors.
Yeah.
In that.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a good movie. I mean,
it's so good. It's so good. Love that film.
Excellent.
Such a long time ago. So what about for Kel then, at least?
Well, I was thinking about this because it's not a spoiler. In the back of the book, it tells you that all the heroes died. I was thinking about people like from the 13th Warrior, like Vladimir Kulik, who plays the really tall guy in 13th Warrior, the main dude.
Yeah.
He could be one of the great heroes, like, you know, one of the giants that was brilliant who died and on the ice, one of them. Just some of those faces in there you could pick out again and use them. Kel's really, really difficult because you want someone who doesn't look like much of anything, but you want someone who's doesn't look like a hero or much of anything. It's just so hard. I think, only because I think he can do anything, he's one of the best actors of generation. I think Ryan Gosling, right? I know he's probably a bit too handsome. Okay. However, but I've seen him play straight dramas and he's incredible. And then you're watching them something like The Nice Guys, and his comedic timing is impeccable.
He's got very good comedic timing.
I was going to steal Gwendolyn Christie for Bronwyn because she's massive and strong.
Do you know what? She can be in 2 films. There you go.
Yeah, and really gobby.
Hello, Netflix.
Malamia is so hard because you want someone. I mean, it would be easy to say Jason Momoa, but he's too much of a bro dude. You want someone who's less of a bro dude, like Aqua Bro all the time. It's like, no, he's supposed to be cocky, but he's not supposed to be a big guy. and he's not supposed to be really tall. She's supposed to tower over
Yeah.
everybody.
She's supposed to tower over him. He's supposed to be kind of like quick.
He's quite
So
an
I saw him-
ordinary, you know, swarthy, broad, chunky guy who thinks he's the bee's knees about everything. But
That's an interesting. What about value?
I don't know. Probably RJ Barker, I think, would be really good.
RJ, if you ever watched this,
RJ, just right in.
Yeah.
that was it. It was Gary Oldman. Sorry, I've just seen in the chat that was the other person, the John Hart for Jack.
Yeah, Gary Oldman can do anything.
So in there.
Absolutely.
Well, we've had much chat, and I will go to my questions, which to both panelists, which type of villain did you have the most fun writing? So that's from Anonymous.
Go on, Cam. I'll have a think.
I really enjoyed writing about Amog, the orc chieftain. Because from the human point of view, she's a brutal savage. But from her point of view, the orcs have been kind of pushed back to kind of desolate highlands, and food life is harsher, and yeah, they're under attack by humans all the time. So why would they have any mercy? It's a struggle for survival for them. So I enjoyed writing the kind of different viewpoint, because I've always thought, from when I first read Lord of the Rings and then watched the movies, I wonder what the story would be like from Sauron's point of view. You know, he's just trying to industrialize Mordor, you know, bring it up into the modern age.
Yes, modernized
coming in trying to destroy everything.
You know, plant more trees once we cut them down. Don't worry, we're gonna build a massive railway, but we'll plant lots of trees. Yeah. Don't worry.
And they're all racist to the orcs. You know, they're not going to trade with them. No. What are they supposed to do? Apart from open restaurants, apparently.
Stephen.
It's not much of a spoiler. There's lots of monsters in the books. I liked writing them and doing something different every time, like coming up with something new and original, not taking something and twisting it or creating something completely original and just doing something a bit different every time. So all the fights were different.
There's certain ones I really enjoyed that I found really, I don't want to spoil people, but the things under the ice, swimming about. I like those a lot.
There's lots of monsters in the book.
Yeah, no, they're very good monsters. So we kind of had half of that question as well from Niels, but Niels also asked, who were the most difficult characters to write, and what made them more difficult, or what was the most difficult character to write?
For me, there's a character in the book called Willow. Was the most difficult to write because she isn't human, and like Amog, from her perspective, humans are one thing, and the way they see her is very different. So she's essentially an alien compared to most humans. There's not many of them. They don't know where they come from. People don't understand them, and she can't really relate to any of them. She's been wandering around the Five Kingdoms, interacting with humans for a long time, but never stays for long. No one knows anything about her culture, and so Kel has to try and unravel her. And so it was a challenge to write the character because I wanted her to appear alien and different and weird, and be constantly questioning things, but also questioning other things that we take for granted. Like it's not a spoiler. At one point, someone sees her staring at a crow and he thinks, oh, maybe she's got a thing for birds. And then he thinks, maybe there aren't any birds where she comes from. Maybe that's food. What is she thinking? Is she looking at something else? Because he doesn't know. You can look at any person in the street, and most of the time you can work out what's going on with their face. You have an inkling or a clue. When he looks in her eyes, there's nothing. He has no point of reference. He has no understanding. He has no knowledge to base any opinion on other than spending time with her. And even then, he's guessing most of the time. He says, is it this? And she's, is it that? And she hates questions. So he's constantly trying to find the truth. So that was definitely a challenge. But it was fun, but it was difficult.
I think for me, I found Tiernak was the hardest to write because he's a broken man, He's a scumbag. Arc going on for at least part of the book, and I constantly found myself wanting to make him come across as a good guy, when he's clearly not, coming from a clan of people that used to raid villages and slaughter people and nick all their stuff, you know. Demonstrably not a good guy, but because he's broken, it's, you know, it's that whole rooting for the underdog thing. I kept wanting to redeem him with some writing, and I had to force myself not to. I'm like, no, remember who and what he is and what he's done. Remember, he's a monster. He knows that. Other people know that, and you know, I had to continually restrain myself from going too far, which I found quite difficult.
Those both make a lot of sense as well, because it sort of, with Tuna, you would kind of feel yourself like, and then he'd open his mouth and you'd be like,
it's easy to,
and
like,
it was
some
quite,
people
it worked, you know, it
yeah.
really worked, but you were just like, oh God. and actually with Willow as well, I thought about her as a character quite a lot, because it gave me it made me think about Adrian Tchaikovsky's writing, and writing from this sort of alien perspective, as well, when I was reading kind of the responses to what is she looks like us, she doesn't look like us, she fights like us, but she doesn't fight like us, and kind of, and again, this is not a spoiler, she eats meat at some points and she doesn't at others, and you can see it driving them all mad, but they can't work out why do they get the extras sometimes and not at others, and you know, that kind of, that what are the values that go behind a character, that, you know, and I thought that was kind of well revealed in a lot of times. And actually Willow and Amog have very similar bluntnesses to some extent, as I thought, you know, we were saying about writing from Amog's perspective, and you were saying with Savage and No Mercy and other things like that. I was like, she's pretty practical though, isn't she? She just, you know,
pretty handy.
Yeah, I mean, she's not nice.
They're not civilized city dwellers, are they?
No, but there's a routine, you know, people survive or they don't. There's a definite honor code. There's, you know, but I thought there's a part where you say that orcs, when they're angry, they go red. But obviously humans, when they're well, yes, when they're angry, they can go red, but they also go red when they're embarrassed. And you know, when she watches one of her trained up warriors get embarrassed about something, she's like, who am I going to kill? Because clearly you're angry. Like, who do you need to kill here? Yes. And it's that different reading of the signals, which is kind of like with Willow.
It makes things interesting.
Yeah. And again, sort of idioms, that language patterns and things like you take for granted in both cases, and having to explain them or not. Do you have this term in your language? Do you not have this? The word lady is not a is an honor term, not like the word bitch. You know, that kind of sort of phrase. And it was really good. So we'll go back to, okay, I'm just gonna get carried away, so I'll go back to audience questions. Will the books be being made into audio books? That's from Rebecca.
Yes. Yeah, mine's already out as an audiobook and an ebook and paperback. It's all out.
Ooh,
available
all
now.
out.
Mine's all ready to go.
And just have you both listened to the audiobooks? How do you find the narration?
I was sent sort of 5 or 6 people to listen to who'd read part of the first chapter. One guy made me laugh. And given that I wrote the book, his interpretation, he didn't change it, but the way he paused made me laugh. It made me forget my own material. I thought, he's the guy. It's a guy called Matt Wycliffe. He did such a good job. I just started laughing and thought, brilliant. Yes, him, please. So done a cracking job. I can't wait.
Yeah, and the good thing about Angry Robot is they do give you some input into these kind of things. Yeah, because I also got a selection of files of the narrators and got to choose my favorite, which thankfully coincided with exactly the one that that they thought was the best as well.
That's brilliant.
It's a guy called George Waitman, and he's absolutely excellent. And I was very impressed. I was like, yes.
Because it does make a big difference. And I'm gonna, because this ties into a question, because I've listened to audiobook, like series of audiobooks when they've changed the narrator halfway through, and you have this, it's really disconcerting. So we know that there is a duology. So The Warrior is due out next year. Cameron, are you going to come back to any of the characters in the Maleficent Seven?
Well, I've written it as a standalone. I didn't think the story needed to be stretched out, being what it is. So you've got 7 villains protecting a town. That's the story. You're not left on a cliffhanger. You know, that's kind of the story I wanted to tell. So it's a standalone at the moment.
Yeah, no, I felt I wondered about I mean that was from Heather. Though I did think that there could definitely be a novella in there with some of the Lorimer you know, the backstories of them all and the pre-campaign days as well.
I like to think the best stories wrap up kind of the main plot lines, but if readers want to kind of imagine bits of backstory or bits of story going on after it, then, you know, they're perfectly free to do that.
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, there's AO3 for all our fanfic needs to kind of discover. So what are you each reading at the moment? What is your current book of choice?
I'm on like the last 50 pages of the Maleficent 7, and then I'm reading Artifact Space by Miles Cameron.
Oh,
that's
lovely.
next for me.
Yeah, so I finished The Coward. I finished R.J. Barker's second book. Boo hiss. So good.
It's here.
At the moment, I've just started reading. I've just started Peter McLean's third book, Priest of Gallows.
Excellent.
And so far, excellent. Yeah.
No, Pete's books are very, very good. Again, full of utter bastards, but you know,
interpretation.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's just it's enjoyable. You know, sometimes people are a bit too saccharine, and you know, you're kind of like kill the farm boy kind of deal, and deal with whatever comes next. So since I think we've kind of come, I'm just double checking, we're coming to end of audience questions, and we're nearly at the end of the day, and we've pretty much survived the melting heat. And both panelists are overdue a very cold beer of some nature.
I've got an ice lolly with my name on it.
Oh, very nice. What type? Instead of beverage of choice. Stephen, what would be your ice lolly of choice?
Probably some kind of Magnum, billionaire caramel Magnum or something, or almond Magnum.
Oh, almonds are good. You have a twister, because then you get the ice cream
twisters,
and the ice lolly part.
Rebecca says it's not very hot in where she is in Minnesota, in America. So. Oh, sorry, it is hot there as well. She said, sorry. Hot everywhere.
Well, this is the thing. I don't know, Rebecca, in Minnesota, you might have aircon. In Glasgow, we don't. We have a really cold close in tenement flats where I am planning to decant myself to go and stand outside in the stairwell in a wee bit.
Our houses are designed to keep heat in. Unfortunately, on the 2 weeks of the year it gets like this.
Yeah, and then
sleep in the garden in a tent, I think.
No. Well, thank you everybody for coming. It has been, and thank Angry Robot very much for both the books and for joining with Glasgow in 2020 to bring you some fun distractions in the middle of your annual pandemic. And we hope you'll join us again. We are hoping to have an event in August. We're just firming up some dates, so that will go live in our socials. And then in September, we do have the date at the moment that we'll be doing something with the Glasgow Writers Circle, of which Cameron is a member, hopefully on the 16th of September, and then on into the autumn. So we look forward to you joining us there. And then we also, if you like our stuff, if you want to, please do go and support us. We can only bring content and only bring a Worldcon to Glasgow if we have supporters. It's quite difficult during a pandemic because we're not having live in-person conventions where people go to the bar and then come along afterwards for the banter and, you know, sign up to support because they want to come to Glasgow. But let's say it will be in August in 2024 if we're seated, and right now Glasgow's looking pretty gorgeous, so I'm sure that you would all love to come and join us. And thank you, and we'll finish early because I need a drink and an ice lolly now.
Yes.
Ice lolly for sure. Oh yeah.
So thank you everybody, and have
Thank
a
you all.
wonderful evening.
Thanks all. Good night.
Bye.